In today's chaotic world, finding calm and contentment is a tricky feat. But according to our next guest, it doesn't have to be. Instead, finding peace could be as simple as applying ancient Buddhist wisdom. Life Hacks from the Buddha is a new book by Dr. Tony Fernando. It distills 2,000-year-old techniques into 50 easy tips. Well, Tony joins me now. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, Daniel.
I read your book. We're all crazy, aren't we? Let's be honest.
Yeah, we're all living in a mental ward.
And this is what inspired you to write this book?
That's a long story.
Yes, talk to us.
As a psychiatrist, I deal with a lot of human suffering. And after a while, you'll realize life is bumpy, but we actually make it more complicated because of our crazy minds. So the Buddha's quite smart in developing a training program. Actually, it's a training program to help us understand how crazy we all are, all of us. And then there are techniques to manage it, and there are basic life skills that we can use.
All right, so let's talk about these key principles that you use. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So number one, it's important before we can actually manage stress, we need to understand what's causing stress. So we always blame everyone else, the government, our neighbor, our partner, our kids. But yeah, they may have a role, but what makes it more complicated is the mind then does catastrophize. We overthink, we overreact, emotions bully us. So to make life a little simpler, less chaotic is number one, to notice that that's what the mind does, and then techniques to manage this overthinking, catastrophic mind that we have.
Okay, so you're talking about these principles.
Yeah.
So how do we apply these principles to our mind thinking?
Yeah, so the first principle, number one, is actually to understand and know that our mind's all over the place. Then there are techniques, including mindfulness is a well-known practice. It came from the Buddha. When we practice mindfulness, we actually get to see what the mind does. And then it also has calming effects. We also realize that when we're mindful, that all of our experiences, even like anger, sadness, anxiety, they come and they go. So if we are calm enough to watch, a lot of these difficulties actually come and go. But our tendency is to hold on. We create stories. So even if our sadness is already going away, then we replay things. And then we complicate it. So that's just some of the techniques that we can do. And there are also practical techniques, which is totally against Western tendencies nowadays. So living simply, not getting too attached to a lot of material things or people around us. But when we live simply, life is actually simpler. But our tendency nowadays is to accumulate, focus on the me. I want to be up, I want to be famous. Those are actually complicated things, which makes life more chaotic.
But many will think that in the real world, life is busy.
Yes.
That's what our life is.
Yes.
So how do you tackle that? What are you wanting people to take from this book? Are they expected just to take a step back, take a deep breath, and find calmness? Because it does sound a bit, come on, does it really work?
Yeah, it's not that simple, of course. It takes practice. So that's why the way I talk about this is the Buddha actually gave a training program. It's not a specific, let's just breathe. That's not enough. We need to have good understanding. We need to have good understanding of what the mind does. And then in addition to understanding, we actually have to have daily practices that can ground us. In fact, one practice I generally do, if I remember it, after I meditate, so I meditate every day, nothing different from being fit physically. You go to the gym, I have to meditate every day because I have a crazy mind. But one practice that I do is to remind myself, Tony, I'm of the nature to age, I'm of the nature to get sick, I'm of the nature to die, and that all that is mine, beloved and pleasing can change. So it's just regular grounding, because we get upset with a lot of things when in fact we don't have control over a lot of things.
You've distilled the Buddha's ancient wisdom into 50 tips.
Yeah, actually it's 50 plus 1. There's a bonus one at the end.
There's a bonus one at
51.
the end. Share us some of those tips then.
the last one, which is supposed to be the bonus hack, is that one of the best techniques to achieve peace and happiness is actually practicing compassion. Compassion is the sensitivity to people's suffering, and then the desire to alleviate them of their suffering, which is very different from how our current world focuses on me. In fact, compassion sounds complicated, but it's actually very simple. It's recognizing that all of us are actually the same. You, me, the Prime Minister, the homeless guy, we all want the same stuff. We all just want to be safe. We want to have food. We want to be loved. We want to be content. So if there are people bickering, different political, divide, instead of focusing on the differences all the time, I think it's important to start, well, we want the best for New Zealand. Yeah, you come from a different perspective, I come from a different perspective. So one of the hacks as well is that recognizing that there are 8 billion realities.
8 billion.
So my reality is different from your reality. It's different from an Ugandan's reality, different from the Chinese Prime Minister's reality, but recognizing that our view of the world is actually very different. There can be commonalities, but understanding that we're all very different, at the same time have commonalities, actually is a good way to view others.
Life hacks from the Buddha, Dr. Tony Fernando. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
People can get this at any bookstore?
In New Zealand and in Australia, you can get it from Amazon.
Right.
Yep.
Perfect. Really appreciate your time this morning. Calm
Thanks,
and contentment.
Tony needs an audio book because I feel calm just listening to his voice.
There is.
Lovely, relaxed.
No, Tony.
There is. Oh, is it your voice?
Yeah. In fact, I didn't want it, but they said, Tony, you should do it.
Oh, 100%. I know, I was just going to say, I'm feeling very calm and content here.
Just talk for the next 3 hours on breakfast.
I know.
I'll be happy.
Yeah, it's been one of those. I feel like
Me Utonu Mai will be right back after the break.